and he is in a number of committees with HBMA, and as you can see, I'm not going to read all of them, you can see for yourself. And he's also, he was just nominated to be the chair of the Innovation Committee, something that HBMA has been trying to push in the last couple of years, so thank you, Kunal. And he's spoken many times at conferences. I'm going to let him talk about India and offshoring. Here you go, Kunal.
Fantastic. Round of applause for winning. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. At least 90% of the room is still intact, so I'm happy to see all these faces. Let's do a quick survey. How many of you are already outsourcing some of your processes to India? Okay. How many of you have not sent any processes to India but trying to contemplate that? How many of you really not doing anything with India but may do in future? Hey, come on, be honest. Those who are not doing it. So everybody is doing. That's great. But I didn't see all the hands earlier. Well, but let me tell you, this is a great opportunity today to learn about not only how the offshore processes can empower your billing companies, but at the same time, what is India at this moment? And larger portion of my talk today, I'm going to cover why India and why India at this moment. Because when I started my company in 2004, I came from India at that time, 20 years almost, as Benny said. And one of my focus at that time was, we had no idea about billing because we started as a transcription company. Before that, I was working for 4 years in Henry Ford Hospitals as their vendor. And we were transmitting a data on a dial-up connection at 36 kbps of speed. And we had a bunch of people sitting in India typing the notes after listening those recordings, which used to transmit overnight from Henry Ford Hospital, Michigan to India. And then from there, it takes us 24 hours. Almost out of 24 hours, it used to take 6 hours to upload the data. So from that point onwards, fast forwards today, when I see India, how India has grown up, one key differentiator which I really like is about the infrastructure. Infrastructure has come forward such a long way. And one of the reasons I really like, of course, these two guys, you know one of them. Another one is India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and our favorite president, Mr. Biden. But I want to talk about India a few more things before we come to the compliance and other stuff which I want to talk about. Recently, India has concluded an international conference called G20. I don't know if you know about it or not, but G20 means the 20 top powerful nations in the world who set the narratives for business and trade and international trade. How international trade is going to look for next 10 years, on which country is going to sit in the top 5 or top 10. This set of people, 20 top nations, they sit down together. I had another slide which I could not submit it on time. Otherwise, I would have showed you the picture of that G20. It's a beautiful picture where top 20 powerful nations, they are sitting on the table. And this just happened 2 weeks ago in India. And one of the key reasons and one of the key idea or messaging was one world, one family, and one goal. And I think that is a very, very powerful message when we look at it. Any industry, just not medical billing industry, just not revenue cycle management industry or a healthcare industry, but as a large, when we talk about any kind of business process and transactions which is happening across the border, and how you are adopting it, how you are embracing it, how you are accepting it as one transaction. And that is a big deal, big change which has happened in the last 10 years when we are talking about, if I take like 3 or 4 things, top three things which has happened in India, one of the major things which has happened is, there were when India got independent in 1947, right? You all know India is like a 75-year-old nation. First 65 years, the India's economy until 2014, the economy was little less than $1.7 trillion. And if you see last 10 years, today, if I see, it's almost $3.7 trillion. So it took 65 years to reach $2 trillion economy, and now in the last 2 years, it has just doubled. By the 2023, end of 2023, we are almost crossing $4 trillion economy. And that's a big change. And that change doesn't happen overnight just because of the political ambitions, political will. Of course, it plays a bigger role. But more than that, the change has happened because of the demographics of India, which has changed in the last 20 years. Today, there are over 65% population of India is less than 35 years of age. So when I'm standing here, the power behind my confidence is their hopes, their aspirations. This is the young India which is ready to take any courage, any risk, any possible challenge which they can overcome, or they can convert them into possibilities and opportunities for the world. And that is the thing I wanted to mention here, because this is a platform where a lot of our colleagues, people who are sitting as our board members, people who are sitting and doing some business in India for the last 20 years, they probably know how the talent works, how the skill set works. They know some of the things which I'm going to talk later about, but they may not know what is the power behind Indian workforce, which is empowering them, giving them that confidence that they are setting new standards, and they are absolutely working on the international standards when it comes to the quality of the work which they are performing. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to really talk about this particular topic. I'll give you a story about the infrastructure. So I just told you when I started my company in 2004 to 2006, almost we were working on a dial-up connection. Right now in India, the largest network, 5G network, it exists in India. It's called Jio. And the richest man in the world, Mr. Ambani, he owns that network. It's called JIO. You can Google it. It has a massive data bandwidth. When I go to India now, my company is in a remote part of Jaipur, which is about 35, 40 miles. And we never even had the cell phones there. We did not have even cell phone towers at like 5 years ago. Now when I go there, I work from my home. I can have a 5G speed on my cell phone. I can connect that cell phone with my laptop, and I can work with the same speed I work at my home here in Tampa. And that is a massive change when we talk about the infrastructure. Same thing when I talk about, this is the latest picture. I was going, this is from Delhi to Jaipur. It used to take 6 to 7 hours. And my hometown is Jaipur. So 10 years ago or 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, 3 years ago in fact, it took me 6 hours, and sometimes if it is traffic, it will take you 7, 8 hours, you would be stuck. This is the latest picture from Jaipur to Delhi. It took me 2 hours. And this change just didn't happen overnight. But this change, what you see, happened in the last 5 to 6 years. And behind that, of course, there's not only a power of political will, as I said, political ambition, but the demographics, which has been changing rapidly in India. Now, I did some math, and those numbers came from Google. I'm going to share it with you. These numbers are very simple to understand. So you know, India is now broken the record for the largest population, 1.6 billion people, 1.5 billion people. So do your math. Out of 1.5 billion people, 55% and above, 55% people are employable. So they are ready to take any employment, about 800 million people. Out of that, 65% are below the age of 35, which leaves you about 500 million people. Right now in India, there is only 5 million people who are employed in a BPO industry. Across the board, there is only 7,000 BPO companies. And out of 7,000 BPO companies, there's 4,000 just billing BPO companies. So if you look at the opportunity to scale, if you're looking at scaling your business and seeing and adopting and taking that opportunity, this is just less than 5% who are working in the BPO industry right now. What could work? So if you take, let's say, just a 10%, it will be 50 million people working in the BPO industry in the next 10 years. And this is a massive opportunity, massive, massive opportunity to tap. The talent is untapped. They are a skilled workforce. They're ready to take new challenges. And most of the time, you see the kind of, and I will come on to the point like why they are ready to take the challenges, because of all the things which we are looking for, how to give them a skill which they really need. Of course, there are some challenges, but one narrative I really want to set here, that India is evolving and it is setting its own business models. I mean, me and my wife, we always go to India, she's sitting here, and we always discuss in the last 10 years that what has changed. And one of the things we always like, just scratch our mind, oh my God, we have told them several times, they just don't get it. Why this is happening? Why this is happening? And later on, over a period of these last 5 years, 6 years, we have realized suddenly the quality of education is coming much better than what it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago. The people who are coming and joining our company in the last 5 years, they can not only speak good English, but they can also understand good English. And that is the key, because language is a great, when you talk about communication, language is not only a barrier, but it also, sometimes, people can speak well. Like I can speak well, but at home, we talk in our native language. Because that is a language of comfort, convenience. So when I go back in my company and I talk to my employees, a lot of time it happens, I like to speak in our native language. And that way they can connect very well with me. My communication is much better. They can understand the terms much better, but at least the process which they were missing, and it was taking me an hour to explain him in English, it took me 2 minutes to explain him in my own language. So one of the barriers which we always talk about when we outsource certain processes to India, we think about the language as a big barrier. But I think in the last 5 years, that language, the barrier of that language is overcome in India. And that is one of the greatest power when we talk about the Indian workforce. Number 2, skilled manpower. And when I talk about the skilled manpower, I don't have many slides. So just bear with me, I'm just coming from my heart, and I hope it works. Can you understand it? All good? Okay, great. I know it's like sounding like a political speech, but this was a part of my presentation, because if I don't explain it well, what India is doing right now, it won't be good at my part that I will jump on the offshore presentation. So bear with me so that you understand and have a clear clarity where I'm coming from. So, and here is a story when I talk about India, which I will give you, and it happened actually in HBMA with me. I used to come in HBMA from 2003, 2004. So in 2006, I met a gentleman in HBMA, and in the parking lot, we were coming from the airport together. And that is the best thing I did, and that's the best story of HBMA to sell. HBMA I can tell to my people and my colleagues. And we started talking. At that time, what you see, a lot of Indian faces right now, at that time they were probably like 5 or 10% Indian faces. And we were talking, and suddenly he came up with, during the conversation, he said, I'm sitting on this big anesthesia billing client, and I don't just have a manpower. And if I can do something with that, I can take up this client. Its client is like have $100 million revenue. I would make probably a couple of $1 million out of this client if I just take it. It's ready to go, ready to go on board. And during that conversation, even Dave and Bob, we had this conversation before about the anesthesia client. So I spoke to him and I said, why don't you outsource to India? And at that time I knew that India's infrastructure was not even capable of handling that kind of data. But then I spoke to him and he said, it's a great idea, I want to do it, but I don't know anybody in India. I know some people who were doing this job for that client. And that client was somebody else actually, and he was trying to take that client because there was some conflict happened and they were trying to take that client on board. He said, I know there are people who are working in South India somewhere for that client. And he asked me, where do you operate? And I said, I have a small unit in North India somewhere near Delhi. He said, how would we bring those skilled manpower to India? And we need at least 150 people. Well, fast forward, After the HBMA is over, I came to know this client was in Tampa, near Sarasota. We were in Tampa, so we met. He came to my office, and fast forward, within 2 weeks, me, my wife, my kids, and these two clients, we were on our flight to go to India. We went to India, we had no idea what we were going to do. I didn't have any unit. I had nothing at that time. All I know is we had a small training center, which we started just to teach medical billing to people who were just working there. So we had only 10 computers at that time. And he was looking at 150 computers. At that time, there were only two companies which were giving India. Dell just entered, and there was a company called HCL Compaq. Do you know Compaq? Do you remember Compaq? There used to be a company called Compaq. They were selling computers in India. So then I said, okay, while in the aeroplane, we landed in Delhi. We were there a couple of days in Delhi, and then they said, we're ready to go. Just hire people, put computers at place, just do it. 2 weeks, we are getting the business. And we were so much in confidence. We didn't sign any paperwork, no contract, nothing. It was purely just conversation. And I said, seriously? And that was my first business conversation. I just came to that country in 2004. So I was not that kind of, experience into handling people, and not even refined. My English was terrible at that time, but I was able to explain it to him. So finally, fast forward, he said, he stayed with us, and we published a big news item in a local newspaper. And at that time, if somebody goes from America with a white face, and his girlfriend was with him, and he was there in front of the cameras, and he said, we are going to hire 300 people in this small city. And everybody started listening. Oh, really? It became a big news. And next thing we know, in our company where we were hiring people, we had some other things going on in that building. We have a line of people waiting and just to be interviewed. And they had no idea what medical billing is, but they just wanted to come and just take up the challenge. They said, we advertise that, do you know English? Can you speak good English? Can you read English? We are going to train you. And you would see 5,000 people just lining up. Finally, because we needed skilled manpower, so this guy said, the best idea would be if we can somehow fly these people from South India to North India. And I said, that's not a problem. And when we talk about India, you really have to understand one more thing. India is not just a country with people. It is a country with people and culture. And that culture is totally, totally different. And if you are not in that culture, it's very difficult for you to understand that culture. And that culture comes from a lot of factors: religion, background, caste, different type of things. And I remember exactly in this case what happened. We had 35 people ready to leave their hometowns, their families, just because they were fearful if they don't do that, they are going to lose their jobs, because that process was moving. They all know, they had ears that, that process is moving, something happened, company is deciding to move their process somewhere else. So they said, we will go with the process. And overnight, these people flew to Jaipur in Delhi, and they said, we are ready to work for you. So within 2 weeks, fast forward, we have ordered computers, we have a 35 skilled manpower working for us, and 2 weeks we have the process which moved from Atlanta, from South India to them, and they started working on it. A lot of things happened later on. I had this client who stayed with me for almost 10, 12 years, and as Dave said, sometimes people leave because they find venture capital. That client exited with at least $100 million cash in his pocket. He was very happy. He lived somewhere in Virginia with a big yacht. So the reason I said I wanted to tell you this story is when you deal with India and Indian culture and a business, sometimes we see other things. We see, hey, do you really have a certified degrees, certified medical billing degrees? Do you know this specialty? Do you have this particular experience for handling charge entry, claims entry, calling AR, patient, all of this? But sometimes you have to see what is the larger picture. How's the motivation of people? People is a big force, and how motivated is that individual to put his life on stake when he comes and ready to take you as a client and take a risk of learning that new set of skills, and then it's like a marriage for them. If they start working for my company, I have 40% employees who have been working for me for the last 15 years. They don't want to go. They don't want to go anywhere. Even if you pay them double the salary, they don't want to change. They have their family system. They live there in the same small town, and they don't want to change. They just don't want to trade in with any other thing, and especially money, no. They may leave you and join somebody else within their neighborhood if they find, like in big towns, this is happening. This is a big challenge in India. In bigger towns, if you go, Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, where there are a lot of companies, a lot of options, yes, people go, switch chains like a revolving door. But when we talk about this small town, this is a one big cultural shift, which we all have to understand why people stick to their job, not because of the money, they stick to their job because of their culture, family values, system, their convenience. It takes 2 hours for an average person from my company in India. Now let's talk about it. So this is my company in Jaipur, that building you see in the left-hand side, and this is the right, this is the cabins we have. We have about 100 people who could sit in one cabin. It takes on an average, so this place is about 35 miles far from a regular metropolitan city where there is an airport. This is like about 30 to 45 minutes drive from the airport. And airport itself is about 30 miles from the city. So on an average, it takes 2 hours for a person when he leaves early morning from his place and come and sit on his desk. And then he works there for 7 hours, of course, with the breaks, and then leaves in the evening. It takes another 2 hours. So it takes almost 11 hours this person spends at my company. And I'm sure this is the case with any other company, those who are having large set of pools, those who have large set of pools in India. So this is one of the biggest challenge India has with the infrastructure. Even with the perfect infrastructure which you see here, the kind of demographic explosion which is happening in India in the last 10 years. You have some pros, but this is the biggest flaw where a person has to spend 4 hours in the transportation. So guess what? My cost of people, if it is 60% of their salary, 40% is the transportation and food. And if I add that cost, and I don't charge my client per FTE, and I only charge them by percentage based, like contingency based, most of the Indian BPOs will go bankrupt, I can tell you. Because it just doesn't make any sense. We have a fixed cost to run business in India per FTE. And people who understand that business model will realize what I'm talking about. Because what happens, you have all kind of clients, just like that. We take client in 5%, 6%, 7%, 10%, depending upon the specialty. But if the small client gives you a small amount of revenue, and if a percentage of that revenue goes back to India, and if you need a full-time FTE or 2 FTE to do that job, and if your cost is coming more than the revenue which we're making on that client, it just doesn't make sense. So sometimes what happens, of course, people will never say no to you. There are a lot of Indian companies, Indian vendors, they would say, okay, it's mix and match, we'll take it. Some FTEs, some percentage based, some revenue based, but the best business model is when everybody is fed properly, and that works long term. So whenever you see infrastructure, whenever you see where you are looking for a massive infrastructure, and that is a priority for you because you are also growing and scaling your company with the same set of kind of growth, then be ready to pay an extra price for that. But what you get with that price is a long-term stability and security. Because then you can implement all the protocols, all the things, all the technology what you really want to aspire. Like in my unit, we have almost cameras everywhere. We have the security level system, what we have here. We have, actually we have one much better system that you can literally track each and every employee who comes in, who goes out. So a lot of these things you can do, but the most important cost which comes when I talk about India is in the infrastructure, food, transportation, salary, and then the third thing is the training. Because if a person is not, if the person is, let's say we have one person, I'm sure people who are doing billing at both places, they say it's a 1:3 ratio. So if I have one biller in my office in Tampa, and if I have to send that process back to India, and if the 40%, 50% job of that client belongs to AR or claims or denial, the process becomes a little difficult in India to handle. But if it is a manual charge entry, data entry, anything online, research, eligibility, where they can hustle more, the process becomes easier at India's side. So the point I'm trying to make is, it really depends what kind of process you are trying to offshoot to India within the medical billing scope. Because sometimes you think, oh, they can do the fantastic mind, they can do everything. They have told us they handle this kind of billing, they can do it. But when you start actually offshoring some of those processes over a period of time, you realize, hey, they're good into some things, they're not good into certain things. And at that moment, you really have to decide what is that cost, the cost of that process in your office, and compared to that cost, how much cost you are ready to bear and ready to pay to an India counterpart. And they are capable of doing that or not. If they are not, then it's your responsibility to train these minds. They're fantastic learners, I can tell you. If you take 30 days, think about it for a moment. Why do I say they are fantastic learners? Here, most of the billers who work in our environment, they are either certified billers, did some kind of course, right? 1 year, 2 year course, have some kind of degrees in medical billing and coding. This is not the case in India. It is not. Most of the people who are working in our industry, not 100% are certified. Maybe 20%, not even 20%. 5%. And I'm sorry to give you that secret, but this is the secret I'm telling you. But they are ready to learn. And how do they learn? They learn just by sitting there, talking to their colleagues, on the job training, working on the software, taking the training on the software, and the process is standard. They do it over and over again, they do it over and again, and they learn it. So, when you say if your cost of a person here for a biller is $3,000, and your cost for handling the same account in India is $1,000, and if you are able to accomplish 100% what that biller is doing, that's the best business model you can have. There you have clear-cut margins and you can thrive and scale. But if you are doing 60%, 70% in India, you can still thrive. If you are doing less than 50%, it's not going to work out. So when you outsource to India, just think that if your productivity is going to go less than 50% with the same set of employees, and if you are hoping to achieve that, it's not going to happen. But what's going to happen is you can hire 3 people instead of 1 person, and it's going to cost you